through language, we now have a whole set of nonsense concepts that have achieved the status of reality. For example, trans woman, trans man, non-binary, the transgender child, or transgender rights. So all of this language is becoming increasingly normalized. Transphobia, of course, is another one. And so I think as women who are experiencing this attack, we need to be very, very clear about the language that we use. Because if we speak the language of transgenderism, what we do is to reinforce these concepts, even if we are critical of them. If I join a debate that is framed as a debate about transgender rights, if I don't challenge that concept in a fundamental way right at the beginning, my participation in that debate suggests that I endorse that notion of transgenderism and transgender rights. And that's something that I see in the United Kingdom, where we have a very active, mobilized movement of women in different groups challenging transgender ideology. But I think it remains a very serious problem that many of those groups continue to speak the language of transgenderism, and therefore actually perpetuate the very ideology which they are trying to challenge. So I see spokeswomen for some groups in the UK beginning, if they're on a TV or radio interview, before they say anything about women's rights, they begin by saying, we support transgender rights and we are not transphobic. Therefore, endorsing and supporting the very concepts which they should be challenging. And this is why I really wanted to participate in this webinar, because I think it's a very serious mistake, and I hope that in Germany you will not make the same mistakes. Because I think as feminists, I hope everybody listening, attending considers themselves a feminist, maybe a radical feminist. As feminists, we understand the importance of resisting patriarchal language. And we understand that language can either illuminate a subject or it can obscure the reality of it. And I think the way in which we illuminate the subject is to use very clear, direct language which names the reality that we perceive. So I'll give an example. I'll just check the time. So I'll give an example. If I'm involved in a discussion, I could refer to the same individual as in one of two ways. I could refer to this individual, for example, as a trans woman. I could use that term that a lot of people are using. If I use this term trans woman, I am saying that that individual is a type of woman. There's an adjective that comes before. So the adjective is suggesting that that woman is part of the subgroup of women, but who has something particular about their identity. So it, as we may say, for example, a Black woman or an old woman or a lesbian woman, that there is this individual as a woman with a particular aspect of their identity or group of women that they belong to. So obviously, if I'm going to use that language, it's very, very difficult then for me to suggest any resistance against what that trans woman wants to do as a woman, because I'm already supporting the notion that this person is a woman. But this is why I think we need to use very simple but very clear language that names men as men, which is always a central part of feminist understanding, that we see where the men are and what they are doing in the world and who they are doing it to. So I could refer to that same individual as a man who demands that we pretend that he is a woman. I think that is a far more precise way of stating who that individual is, what his behavior is, and what its impact is on women. Because what that reveals, if we say a man who demands that we pretend he is a woman, what that reveals is, one, male entitlement. He has a sense of self that he believes is entitled to dictate how I speak. It reveals male force and coercion, because behind this word demands is a force that if we don't comply with that demand, there could be very serious consequences for us. It reveals psychological abuse, because he's demanding that we pretend that something is true when it isn't true. So it reveals that abuse. It reveals a level of violence from that force behind the word demand. And it reveals the male will to violate women's boundaries, because he's pretending he's a woman and he wants us to pretend he's a woman so that he can access our spaces, our communities. So that's why I think it's really crucial that we name what is happening in a very clear and direct way, because otherwise all the things that we understand to be features of patriarchy, male entitlement, male aggression, male violence, is masked, is obscured by the transgender vocabulary.